We're talking about hair. Hello, this is Susie Walker here from Psychologies Magazine. We are joined today by Bertie. I don't know if you see Bertie, the rescue dog, and the wonderful Sarah Cruddas. Sarah is here today to talk about outer space. Sarah is a background in astrophysics. Wow. Space journalist, TV host, and best-selling author. And Sarah has a new book out called Look Up, Our Story with the Stars. I'm so delighted that you're joining us, Sarah. Hello, hello, hello.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Here is the book, Look Up, Our Story with the Stars.
Oh, it's a beautiful, that's a thing of beauty, Our Story with the Stars. So, Sarah, tell me, first of all, what inspired you to write this book?
That's a great question, and one I pondered all the time when I was actually writing this book, because as we were just chatting offline a second ago, like, writing books is an incredibly hard thing to do, and I've got a huge amount of respect for anyone who's written a book. But for me, this is my first adult's title, and I can't remember a time where space hasn't been my passion. Like, literally my first memory as a child is of looking up at the moon, being inspired by the night sky, and all the possibilities that lie out there elsewhere in the universe. And the reason I wrote this book, and I guess the meaning's kind of changed with what we've seen in 2020, but basically the initial meaning was to inspire as many people as possible about why space matters and how it relates to all of us. It doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're 6 or 66, we can all be inspired by the possibility that we're just this one tiny planet, which is one of many trillions of planets that exist in the universe, so impossibly large we cannot even begin to comprehend it. And for pretty much every single star you see, when you look up at the night sky, there's at least one planet orbiting around it. So I wanted to inspire people about all the wonder and possibility, and how space has transformed our life on Earth, and why it really is our future, the most significant thing we'll ever do as a species. But then, of course, 2020 happened. When I finished writing the book, I actually finished writing the book in lockdown. And I think space took on, and science as well, the value of science took on a whole new meaning in 2020. And now my hope from this book, on top of everything else, and my inspiration for this book, is now that it will give as many people, as many of you as possible, hope about what else is out there, and how the best is yet to come in what has been a difficult year. And we should look forward to all the great things which are happening as we continue to explore space. So that is a long answer to your question, but I hope I answered it.
Great answer. I mean, I think you're right. Lockdown has almost made us look down. You know what I mean? It's made us kind of go very insular into ourselves. So I love this instruction to look up, and this idea of getting perspective on our lives. I once remember when I was a teenager getting completely freaked out by the idea of space, and sort of lying there and someone saying, our universe is like one speck of sand, and then the kind of concept, and then I got onto aliens, which I'll come to in a minute. But this thing is like, how can looking at space give us perspective on our lives? Sometimes it all seems so overwhelming, doesn't it? And COVID, and oh my God, and how am I going to pay the bills, and how is this going to work? So how can we use it from a psychological point of view to kind of gain perspective on what's happening? How can we kind of give ourselves some space by looking at space, if that makes any sense?
That makes absolutely a lot of sense. And I'm going to try and keep the answer as short as possible. But we spend our lives looking down, and we spend our lives caught up in earthly problems, and that makes sense. I'm as guilty as the next person. But if we could just step away from our smartphones, step away from all our contraptions, and pause and take a deep breath, and be at one, look up at the night sky. On social media, I was running this lockdown but looking up thing, because actually space is accessible to anyone. It's free to look up at the night sky. You don't need any special equipment. It's there for us all to access. So for me, it's a sense of perspective that can come from just pausing. And space isn't going to solve your day-to-day problems. I'm not here to tell you that, but what I am saying is that it can give you some hope and some inspiration about what is out there, what it is we're a part of, and perhaps a bit of meaning in their life. Because to me, space and space exploration is as much about philosophy as it is about science. Because when we go into space, when we explore space, when we send probes out into space, we're trying to answer some really fundamental questions, such as, where did we come from? Where did we as a species, where did all life on Earth come from? Are we alone in the universe? Is there other life out there we don't know yet? And also, what is our destiny? Because our star's not going to be, it's very depressing here, but in a few billion years' time, our star, the sun, won't exist, and our solar system won't exist as it was. So it's this idea of, where next for humanity. So I think that just pausing, and it's almost like a form of meditation, actually, just being able to pause and to look up and to feel wonder, to look at the planets. You don't even need to know what you're looking at, but I like to hold on to that fact that for pretty much every single star you can see twinkling in that night sky, there's at least one planet orbiting around it.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. I mean, I spent a little bit of August. I went down to Cornwall, and there's big dark skies out there, and lying on a beach looking at the stars. It did give me a sense of calm. That's, I don't think that anything else. So you talk about meditation, but there is that kind of you're humbled, and the one, by your place in the universe. In terms of advice for people, so for people to reconnect with the wonder, as you talk about in the book, what can you give us some kind of practical advice on how to do that? So, obviously buy your book and read it, great. But top tips for us, so to reconnect with the magic of space and what that can give us, or to start exploring that, to do our own space exploration. Where do we start?
Well, of course, you need to buy my book, Look Up, Our Story with the Stars. Thank you for letting me have that plug there. But I think it's actually multi-faceted, and I'm going to go up on 3 points. Again, I'll try and be as quick as possible. I do love to talk about space. The first one is it's a little bit more down to earth, and I talk about this in the book. And it's one of the things. I grew up living on benefits in a single parent family on the outskirts of Hull. I'm not from privilege at all, but one of the things that inspired me most growing up was stories of astronauts and stories of the humans behind space exploration, those first pioneers, who decades ago made the impossible possible by stepping out into the cosmos. And I think actually my first tip would be to learn about space explorers, learn about in the book I write about dedication, determination and sacrifice, because we can learn a lot from what it takes to leave this earth, to the risk that people are willing to take because they're pursuing something greater than themselves, which is stepping foot into the cosmos, stepping beyond Earth and beginning to explore what it is we're a part of. The dedication and determination. People who came from quite underprivileged backgrounds, but who then ended up going to space, ended up being able to no longer look up at the stars, but being able to go there and look back at Earth. So my first bit of advice would be to surround yourself with, and we need positivity right now because there's a lot of negativity in the world, but surround yourself with positive stories, the stories of space explorers, those who've achieved the impossible, and also those who failed as well, because in space exploration, we've failed a lot. Lives have been lost in space. The pursuit of the stars is not safe, but look at the reason why people continue to risk their lives and to be drawn to that higher calling. And I think from understanding the motivation behind our space explorers, that can enrich our own lives, because that can help us to understand, that things are impossible. Even when the worst happens, it's not our failures that define us, it's actually how we respond to them. So I think there's a lot of life lessons that can come from people who've pursued space. The second thing is just in terms of how to get more connected with space, I guess. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's why I called this book this. Look up. We just need to pause, take a moment, step away from that smartphone, step away from the technology, stop reading things on the internet. We're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. And just, you don't even need to go outside. Look out of the window, turn off the lights, open your window, look out. I don't have a garden here. I live in an apartment, but just look out that window and begin to wonder what else is out there. I mean, you can, there's some great resources actually. A NASA website called spotthestation.gov will actually tell you when you can see the International Space Station passing above you. And there's up to six human beings, there's 3 at the moment, but up to 6 human beings living and working in space. It's the 20th anniversary of continuous human occupation of the International Space Station. And you can occasionally see the space station crossing the night sky. So that would be my first resource. And then the second thing is there's a lot of great resources online in terms of, and apps in terms of what you can see. But in all honesty, my advice would just be to look up. It doesn't matter if you know what you're looking at or not. It's more about the wonder that can come from space and the hope and the possibility and the excitement. So those would be my top tips, I guess. Learn about the space explorers, which I write about in my book, those who have driven us to the stars, but also just pause, try and take a moment to actually look up and feel wonder about the night sky. And then also as well, just remember that, I don't remember the moon landings, but hopefully some of you watching this might do. And when humans first went to the moon, there was a hope that we'd have jetpacks and flying cars and people would be on Mars by now, and actually we haven't got the space future we wanted. But all of us today have a smartphone which is connected to satellites in space, and all of us are living in the space age. So just know that we use space every single day of our lives, whether it's something to do with as humble as turning on your electricity, and actually precise timings from satellites in space help with the electricity grid, or whether it's calling a car on your phone and you're actually using satellites to help navigate you. We use space every single day. We are living in the space age, and just be inspired by that.
In terms of you personally, and your connection, your own space journey, how has it transformed your life? How has your connection to space transformed the way you think or the way you feel? And can you give me examples of that?
That's a great question. I think space, first of all, has transformed my life because it is my life. Space has given me opportunity, pursuing space, pursuing education within space. I was the first person I'm ever related to go to university. I went to study astrophysics, where I was one of only 8 girls in a class of 80 to be studying astrophysics. I now work within the space industry, normally in the US. And I think for me, space has transformed my life in terms of what I've been able to achieve. I've worked with people such as Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Buzz Aldrin, and done things I could have never imagined growing up as a child. But at the same time, all of us get stressed in our lives. All of us go through difficulties, and I'm not going to pretend my life's perfect, but space and that wonder which has come from space always gives me hope, and it always gives me, even in the darkest of days, positivity that we can overcome things. When you learn about the stories of space explorers, and when you wonder about the possibility of what else is out there in the universe, and you see these images of our Earth as a tiny speck, when we go back, say, for example, to the planet Saturn, we're just a tiny blue speck. And when you realize how small and insignificant we are and how we're all in this together, I think certainly in my life, that's not always, and it's, no one's perfect, but it's certainly made me, whenever I've gone through difficult times, try and pause and to think of the grandest scheme of things that we all are a part of. I'm loving the questions, by the way. I love this, and I think people just think space is about scientific research and academia, but it's not. It is as much about the human mind and connectedness and realizing what else is out there as much as anything else.
I mean, I think because it's very unusual, isn't it? For as you said, there's only a tiny amount of people who've actually gone into space, and you've been around them, and you've talked to them, and you've interviewed them, and I think that is, there's a huge learnings for us from there. You talked about Buzz Aldrin there. I mean, in terms of all the astronauts you've met or you've interviewed in the past, what do you think are some of the life lessons that they're coming back with? I mean, you're talking about kind of that sense of connection and that talking a sense of perspective, but is there anything that kind of surprised you about, when they've said, because I mean, to meet an astronaut, I mean, I think it's a real wow, isn't it? It's like amazing. So what wisdom have they got to share with us?
Well, I think there's so much. I need to give a shout out as well to Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins, who actually wrote the foreword to the book. So for those of you who don't know, Neil and Buzz landed on the surface. It was Michael who actually orbited the moon alone, and he talks in the foreword of the book about how going into space has changed his life. And I think working with astronauts, one of the things that you get most from pretty much nearly everyone who's been to space, and I talk about this in the last chapter of the book, as well as Michael's own perspective on it as well, is that when astronauts go to space, they're no longer looking up. So for the entire history of our species, we looked up at the stars and wondered, but all of us alive today are living in a time when we no longer need to look up, but we can actually travel to space, although it's only fewer than 600 people who've done so far. But we can travel to space, we can send humans to space, and those humans, they don't want to look at the stars when they're there, they look back at Earth. And that transformative shift in awareness of seeing Earth from space, seeing how Michael Collins described it as sparkling like a little gem, and realizing how fragile our planet is, and how what divides us on Earth means nothing in the vastness of the universe. And I talk in the book about astronauts who've walked on the surface of the moon. For example, Edgar Mitchell, he was a part of Apollo 15. He was the 7th person to walk on the moon, and he became a priest when he came back. He was so profoundly impacted by seeing. Imagine standing on the surface of the moon and looking up and seeing the Earth like we see, like a larger version of we see the moon in the night sky, and knowing that's the whole of humanity, the whole of human existence is played out on something you can now look up at and cover with your thumb. Other astronauts have come back artists, or they've come back profoundly aware of how unjust our planet is and how unfair our planet is and how there is so much division. Many have come back with a sense that, you know, we are just how fragile it is, and how we need to better look after spaceship Earth, as they call it. And what I think we're seeing now, because the way we explore space is changing, it's no longer just about countries, but also private individuals. We're seeing a rise in the entrepreneurial space age, as I like to call it.
Yes, but Elon Musk thing,
Elon Musk and many others. But what we're seeing now is that to date we've been sending the same kind of person to space, so mostly military or scientists, a few billionaires who've gone with commercial tourism flights with the Russian Soyuz. So we've sent the same type of person. Most of them are white and male as well. But what we're going to see in the next few years is a democratization of space. So I sit on a board of an organisation called Space for Humanity, which is actually paying for people from all walks of life to have tourist flights to space. And what we're going to see is a change in the type of person who goes to space. So no longer scientists and academics, but also artists, philosophers, painters, musicians, people who might have had no relation to space in their life. And with that change is going to come what is known as the overview effect, and that's the transformative potential and the humbling effect which comes from seeing Earth from space. And the more people, you know, we sent trained military personnel and they came back religious, or they came back as artists. What will happen when we send artists and people from all walks of life, and how does that impact life on?
I love to give amazing. I mean, I you know, when you're talking, I actually feel quite emotional, because you know, as you say, it's the ultimate perspective, isn't it? And having the opportunity for all humanity. What an I mean, wow. Did I mean, imagine if you're that artist or that, you know, getting the opportunity to do that. Have you ever been into space?
No, fewer than 600 of us have been to space. I would love the opportunity to go one day. But we've got to bear in mind, going to space isn't like getting on an aeroplane. This is a hugely risky activity. You know, I think of the fewer than 600 who've been to space, something like 1 in 17 have died in actually going into space. With the space shuttle, I think the mortality rate or the risk of dying was something like 1 in 62. Now, imagine going to work knowing you've got a 1 in 62 chance of not making it home, yet people still choose to do that. They still choose to explore space. So I haven't personally been yet, but what we will see is a shift over the next few decades of the type of person that can go to space.
Yeah, interesting. What I have to let you go, but before I go, I have to ask I know, but aliens. The aliens, you know, I mean, I once said to somebody, I'm not sure aliens exist, and they went, oh, for God's sake, you know, the universe is so immense and huge. How can you possibly be so arrogant? And then from that moment on, I was like, oh, E.T.
Yeah.
But what's your perspective on other life out there?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know whether you heard in the news this week about Venus, how they found what's known as biomarkers, so indications of possible microbial life existing within the clouds of Venus. And microbial just means something you need a microscope to see it through. It's a very simple life. Within our own solar system, there are many candidates for simple life, microbial life. Mars, Venus, you know, Venus, we thought life might not even exist there, but now obviously it's a hugely exciting place for potential of life. So Venus, Mars, Titan, which is this moon of Saturn with its own atmosphere, and then also Europa and Enceladus, which are these icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, which both potentially have liquid oceans underneath. So we've got many candidates within our own solar system of simple life. Now, if we find life in our solar system, which we potentially will do within the next few decades, prove that it's independent of life on Earth, even if it's simple life, that means 2 genesises within this one average solar system. And we know there are more planets than stars out there in the universe. There are trillions of stars. So the real question is there intelligent life or not? Is it more intelligent than us? Is it something that just passes us by? And yes, it sounds like science fiction, but it's better than science fiction because it's a reality. It's stuff scientists are working on. And within, you know, this century's greatest achievement in science may very well be the fact that we prove we're not alone in the universe.
Oh my goodness. I mean, wow, that is so exciting. What an exciting concept. I mean, wow. I love what you're doing. I love, you know, all the things that you're doing. You're doing a brilliant job. Show your book again. Everyone should read your book. Everybody tonight, if you've watched this interview, let's all look up and get a perspective on the universe, and let's all go and buy Sarah's book.
I wanted to tell you quickly what you can see in the night sky tonight, very quickly. If you look to the south, the brightest star you can see just after sunrise, really bright star in the south, that is the planet Jupiter. Just to the left a bit, a slightly less bright star, that is the planet Saturn. And then a few hours later in the east, you'll see a red, again, star, and that is the planet Mars. So 3 planets you can see when you look at the night.
Wow. Well, I'm going to do that tonight. I hope it's not cloudy. Brilliant. That's really That's great. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. That was I'm really inspired. I feel like really excited about all of that. Thank you so much. Even Bertie the dog's inspired.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.